Easy, easy. Hold the rope tight.
He's too strong.
In the heart of the sprawling Midwest, amidst vast fields and endless horizons, lives a rancher whose life is as deeply rooted in the land as the cattle he cares for. His days begin before dawn, tending to the animals, repairing fences, and ensuring the smooth operation of his humble farm. But it was one fateful day years ago that would change the course of his life and that of an abandoned foal he would come to save. The foal, barely clinging to life, appeared on his property one cold, stormy evening. Emaciated, injured, and weak, it seemed like a hopeless cause. The rancher, however, wasn't one to back down from a challenge. Despite the odds stacked against him, he made the decision to nurse the young horse back to health. With gentle hands and an unshakable determination, he worked tirelessly, feeding the foal, tending to its wounds, and offering the warmth of the barn as shelter from the harsh elements. What started as an act of mercy soon grew into a bond neither could have ever anticipated. The foal's survival was nothing short of miraculous. Little did the rancher know, this small act of kindness would lead to a remarkable reunion years later, a moment that would unfold before millions on live television. It was a cold, blustery evening when the rancher first found the foal, barely more than a bundle of fur, shivering beneath a weathered fence post. The storm had swept through the fields, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. His eyes narrowed as he saw the small, fragile creature, an animal in dire need of help. It seemed as though the foal had been abandoned, left to fend for itself in the cruel cold. The rancher didn't hesitate. His instincts, honed over years of working with animals, told him that this was no ordinary case. He knelt beside the foal, feeling the chill of its body and hearing the faint whimpers of pain as it struggled to lift its head. There was no time to waste. Every second could be the difference between life and death. Carefully, he lifted the foal into his arms, cradling its fragile form. The small horse was lighter than he had anticipated, its ribs painfully visible beneath its coat. His heart sank as he realized the extent of the foal's suffering. It was weak, malnourished, and had likely been left to die, either due to injury or illness. Yet, in that moment, the rancher made a decision that would change everything. He carried the foal into his barn, gently placing it on a bed of straw. The warmth of the barn contrasted sharply with the biting cold outside, but it did little to soothe the foal's trembling form. The rancher knew that this was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey. There was no guarantee that the foal would survive, but he couldn't bear the thought of leaving it to die. The rancher's hands worked with precision and care, preparing a mixture of milk and nutrients to feed the starving animal. He knew that the foal needed more than just food. It needed tender care, attention, and patience. As the hours ticked by, he stayed by the foal's side, feeding it small sips, rubbing its coat to warm it, and checking for signs of improvement. It was a slow process, each moment stretching on endlessly. Yet, with each passing day, the foal's condition began to improve. The feeble whimpers turned into soft neighs, and the once lifeless creature began to show a glimmer of strength. The rancher felt a quiet sense of hope settle in his chest, but he knew the real battle had just begun. As the days passed, something beautiful began to unfold between the rancher and the foal, something that words could hardly capture. The rancher, who had spent most of his life tending to animals, had always understood the delicate dance of trust. But with this foal, something deeper was at work. Perhaps it was the bond forged in the fire of struggle, or maybe it was simply the quiet companionship of two souls drawn together by fate. Every morning, the rancher would step into the barn with the rising sun, and the foal would be there, waiting for him. At first, the foal was skittish, too weak to run, but its eyes were bright, curious, and full of life. Slowly, it began to recognize the rancher's presence as something safe, something constant in a world that had been nothing but uncertainty. The rancher was patient, never pushing the foal, always letting it set the pace. He would sit beside it for hours, quietly talking to it, telling the foal about the ranch, the other animals, and the land he had worked for so many years. His deep voice seemed to soothe the foal, and with each passing day, the foal's trust in him deepened. It was as though the rancher was not just healing the foal's body, but also its spirit, which had been broken by neglect and pain. As the foal's strength began to return, so did its playfulness. It would stumble on wobbly legs, trying to keep up with the rancher's movements, and though it often fell, it always got up, determined. There were mornings when the rancher would find the foal standing by the barn door, as if waiting for the day's adventure to begin. He'd chuckle softly, offering his hand, which the foal would nuzzle with its soft muzzle, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. With each passing day, the foal grew more confident. It would follow the rancher as he worked, its small hooves tapping on the barn floor, its coat starting to shine with health. And the rancher, too, felt a connection that went beyond mere care. He was no longer just a man tending to a creature in need. He was a companion to the foal, and the foal had become a part of him. The bond between them, once fragile, now felt unbreakable. What began as an act of kindness had transformed into something much deeper, an unspoken partnership, born from trust, perseverance, and an unwavering commitment to one another. As the seasons shifted from the harsh winter to the warmth of spring, the foal's transformation became even more evident. What had once been a fragile, trembling creature was now growing stronger, its coat gleaming with vitality, its legs firmer with each passing day. The rancher watched with quiet pride as the foal, now more of a colt, began to find its footing in the world. The rancher had always been accustomed to seeing animals mature, but this was different. He had been there for every moment of the foal's recovery, each hesitant step, every nudge of encouragement. He could still remember the day when the colt first trotted across the barnyard, its gait awkward yet full of energy, a stark contrast to the frail creature it had once been. It was a sight to behold, a victory not just for the foal, but for him as well. As the colt grew, so did its personality. It began to develop a curiosity about the world around it, darting playfully through the fields, investigating the other animals on the ranch. The rancher would often watch from a distance, his heart swelling with joy as the colt learned to interact with the other horses. It was as though the foal had found its place within the world, its once broken spirit now a source of exuberant energy. The rancher never missed an opportunity to nurture this growing independence. He introduced the colt to the larger pasture, where the other horses roamed freely. At first, the colt was hesitant, unsure of its place in the herd. But it didn't take long for it to gain confidence, slowly joining the older horses in their daily routines. The rancher, of course, was always there, watching from the sidelines, a steady presence in the colt's life. With each passing day, the colt grew stronger and more confident. The rancher taught it the ways of the ranch, guiding it through the basics of ranch work, from leading the herd to carrying light loads. The colt's intelligence and eagerness to learn were apparent, and the rancher couldn't help but marvel at how far the animal had come. Yet, as the colt blossomed into a young horse, the rancher couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. The foal he had saved, the fragile creature he had nursed back to life, was no longer a helpless animal. It had become a proud and capable horse, ready to take on the world. And while he felt immense pride in its progress, there was also a sense of loss, knowing that the time would come when the colt would need to forge its own path. Still, the rancher never doubted that the bond they shared would endure. It wasn't just about the work or the horses, it was about the connection they had built. A connection born from trust, perseverance, and love, an unspoken understanding that would last a lifetime, no matter how far the horse would eventually roam. As the colt grew into its full strength, the rancher realized that this was what it meant to nurture life, to guide, to teach, and, most importantly, to let go when the time was right. But for now, there was no need to rush. The rancher continued to care for the horse, proud to have been a part of its journey, knowing the bond they shared would never fade. It happened one quiet morning, the kind where the sun barely rises above the horizon and the air is crisp with the promise of a new day. The rancher stepped out of the barn, expecting to see the familiar sight of his herd grazing peacefully in the pasture. But when he glanced over, his heart skipped a beat. The colt, now a strong young horse, was nowhere to be seen. At first, he thought it was just an oversight. Perhaps the horse had wandered off during the night, exploring the fields as it had done many times before. But as the rancher called its name, his voice echoed back to him, unanswered. A sense of unease began to settle in his chest. He knew this land well. There were no places for the horses to hide, no nearby woods or valleys where they could disappear. The rancher's eyes scanned the horizon, but there was no sign of the colt. Panic slowly crept in. Had it gotten hurt? Had it been taken? He walked briskly to the farthest corners of the property, checking the fence lines, the creek bed, and even the small barn where the other horses were kept. But the colt was nowhere. Days turned into restless nights as the rancher combed the land, calling the colt's name into the wind. He asked neighbors, posted flyers, and even reached out to local animal shelters, hoping for some sign of the horse. But the silence was deafening. It was as though the colt had vanished without a trace, and the rancher was left with nothing but the aching emptiness of its absence. Weeks passed with no word of the colt. The rancher's days were filled with a quiet, aching emptiness. The routine of ranch life went on, but there was always a part of him that felt incomplete. The once energetic colt, now a constant thought in his mind, had disappeared without a trace. The rancher continued searching, but the hope of finding the horse grew dimmer with each passing day. Then, one morning, the phone rang. It was a local animal rescue center, calling to inform the rancher that a horse had been found, one matching the description of his missing colt. His heart raced. Could it really be? He quickly grabbed his jacket and drove to the shelter, praying that the call was not some cruel misunderstanding. As he pulled into the parking lot, he saw a familiar figure standing in the center of the yard. At first, he couldn't believe his eyes. The horse was standing tall, its coat gleaming in the sunlight, its eyes wide with recognition. It was the colt, his colt, now fully grown, but unmistakably the same horse he had saved all those years ago. The rancher stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The colt seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then, as if remembering the bond they had shared, it trotted toward him. With a joyful whinny, the horse nuzzled the rancher's chest, just as it had done in the barn when it was a foal. Tears welled in the rancher's eyes as he wrapped his arms around the horse's neck, feeling the same warmth he had once held in his arms when it was weak and fragile. The reunion was beyond words. The rancher could hardly believe it. His beloved colt, the one he had thought lost forever, had found his way back to him. The horse had been through an incredible journey of its own, but it had come home. And the most remarkable part, the reunion was caught on live television. A local news station had been covering the story of the missing horse, and as the rancher and colt embraced, the cameras rolled. The whole town watched as the incredible bond between man and animal was rekindled for the world to see. As the rancher stood there, wrapped in the warm embrace of the colt, the world around him seemed to fade into the background. The sound of the wind, the rustling of the trees, everything disappeared, leaving just the two of them, reunited after months of uncertainty. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he didn't care. This wasn't just a reunion, it was the culmination of a journey that had tested his patience, his hope, and his heart. For the rancher, the bond with the colt had never been just about care, it was about a connection that went beyond the physical. He had saved the foal when it was nothing but a broken shell of an animal, and now, standing in front of him, was a strong, proud horse that had survived against all odds. The journey they had shared, from that first night in the barn to this moment of reunion, had shaped both of their lives in ways neither could have imagined. He thought back to the countless hours he had spent nursing the foal back to health, the long nights when he doubted whether the foal would pull through. And yet, there it was, alive and thriving, with a spirit that matched his own. The emotional toll of those months had been heavy, but in that moment, standing face to face with the horse, all of it seemed worth it. But the emotional weight didn't stop there. As the colt nuzzled his neck and the rancher gently stroked its mane, he realized that the bond they shared had grown stronger in their time apart. The rancher had often wondered what had happened to the horse, but now he understood. The colt had not just wandered away. It had embarked on its own journey, and somehow, despite the distance, it had found its way back to him. The reunion, captured live on TV, was more than just a personal victory. It was a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the deep, unspoken bond between man and animal. Viewers across the country were moved by the raw emotion of the moment, and as the rancher spoke through his tears, he shared a message of hope: never give up. Love and trust always find a way. As the cameras continued to roll, the rancher and his horse stood together, their connection undeniable. The journey wasn't over, it had only just begun. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ranch, the rancher stood with the colt by his side, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace. The journey they had shared, from the foal's near death to this miraculous reunion, had come full circle. It wasn't just a story of survival, it was a story of resilience, of love that transcended time and distance, and of an unbreakable bond formed in the most unlikely of circumstances. The rancher looked at the colt, now a proud and strong horse, and felt an immense gratitude in his heart. He had saved the foal when it had no chance, but in return, the colt had saved him too. It had reminded him of the power of hope, the strength in vulnerability, and the unspoken language that connects all living beings, no matter the species. The media frenzy that followed the reunion only added to the significance of the moment, but for the rancher, the real meaning was much deeper. It wasn't about the cameras, the applause, or even the public recognition. It was about the quiet bond he shared with this horse, one that spoke of trust and devotion beyond words. As the years continued to pass, the rancher and the horse would continue to work the land together, side by side. The rancher knew that the journey was not just about the past, it was about the future, about all the days they still had ahead. The horse had returned, but their bond had only grown stronger, and in that unbreakable connection, they had found something rare and beautiful. In the end, the rancher's message was simple yet powerful. No matter the obstacles, never lose faith. True love, once nurtured, always finds its way home.